What's going on, everyone? John Matrix here. So today we've got a pretty requested video from several people. We're going to check out Arbiter Ian's The Lost Legions and Primarchs of the Horus Heresy. This is one, like I said, one requested by several people. So I will have the link to this video and this channel without my commentary, all that kind of stuff, and to Arbitor Ian's channel down in the description below to go check out his stuff. He's got a ton of content on the Warhammer 40k universe and lore and stories and everything else, so you should definitely go check him out and give him a sub, give him a follow, all that kind of stuff, and check out his content. So I'm sure he would appreciate it, and so would I. So like I said, we're gonna check this video out here. Yeah, let's just jump into it. Get into it here.
Heresy. The War Master Horus led half of the 18 legions of Space Marines against the Emperor. But originally, in the days of the Great Crusade, there were 20 legions, and the story of how those two missing legions and the Primarchs who led them were lost was a mystery even back then.
And this is something that I've had questions about, these, you know, what actually happened to these two lost legions. You know, there were originally 20, and, you know, it's been nicked from history that there's actually only ever been 18. So, I don't really know anything about these other legions, so this is going to be a video that hopefully will answer those questions for me.
Hiya, welcome back to Heresy 101. So I'm halfway through my look into the origins of the 20 legions of Warhammer's Horus Heresy, and I've reached Legion 11, one of the Lost Legions. Now, I tried to do a history of one of these guys when I did the video on the second Legion, but that ended badly. After all, the Lost Legions are lost.
Oh, they're lost,
don't know what happened to them. But there are rumors everywhere. So in this video, I'm going to go through them, all the little lines here and there, all the little bits of information hidden in novels, and see if I can figure out how they all tie together. References to the two Lost Legions have been in 40k since the 1990s. Lists of the 20 legions of Space Marines always have Legions 2 and 11 blacked out, information redacted, all knowledge lost.
I wonder if Game Workshop, like, they have ideas or plans for these legions in the future, or if they just plan on keeping them like that's just a history and they want to keep that like ambiguous and obscured, and they're not actually going to let us know what really happened to them.
2 and 11 blacked out, information redacted, all knowledge lost. Originally, this was intended as an easy way for players to come up with their own background and add to the universe, something that's encouraged in all Warhammer games, including the Horus Heresy. But like much of early Warhammer, it's also a historical reference. Rome also had two Lost Legions, destroyed at the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest and then never rebuilt. But anyway, in this setting, the two Lost Legions are a good way to show the ruthlessness of the Emperor and the Imperium, to show that even in a world where Horus and half of the legions committed the ultimate sin and turned traitor, there's still something worse, that there were two legions whose fate was so bad every shred of information on it was obliterated.
That is kind of true. I mean, I guess the Horus Heresy was probably big enough of a historical, you know, event that it would be pretty hard to cover up, I guess. I don't know. I mean, the universe is so vast and so big that a lot of citizens of the Imperium, you know, have never seen a Space Marine. They're mythological, you know, heroes to some, and Terra's like a wholly mythological, you know, planet, I believe, even. So maybe it wouldn't be. I don't know, but I would think that those events might be a little harder to, you know, cover up, or whatever you want to call it, you know, because of how big a historical event it would be, you know. So, but I don't know, maybe the Horus stuff isn't as common knowledge. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not as common knowledge, and people don't necessarily know about Horus and what happened to his legions, and et cetera, because a lot of people don't know about Chaos. Chaos is very hush-hush, and only, you know, the Inquisitors and certain, you know, chapters of the Astartes know about, you know, Chaos and the Chaos Demon, etc. So maybe people don't know about Horus and the Heresy as much. Well, because I guess people don't necessarily know that the Emperor's you know, injured, dying, etc. either, you know, so.
And for many years, that's all we had. But when the Horus Heresy started being fleshed out with the Black Library novel series and later the Forge World gamebooks, the authors obviously needed to deal with this. The background of those books goes all the way back to the very start of the Imperium, so whatever happened to the Lost Legions is going to be part of that. But through some clever storytelling, they've successfully managed to keep the fate of the Lost Legions a secret, littering all these books with tiny references or half-stories for an obsessive loremonger like me to attempt to reconstruct. So let's have a look at what we know about the two Lost Legions. Right, I've done 10 videos on this, we should know the basic story by now. During the unification of Terra at the end of the Age of Strife, the Emperor and his scientists created 20 Primarchs, demigods to lead his new legions. The Primarchs were scattered through the warp in a great conspiracy, coming to rest on various human worlds, but the Emperor was still able to build all 20 legions from their genetic material, and these legions fought in the unification wars on Terra and then joined the Great Crusade. They spread out across the galaxy to unify humanity, and over the course of that crusade, all 20 Primarchs were found. That's really old background, going back to the second and third editions of the game in the 90s. But we know that that account of events still stands because in Black Library stories set during the Great Crusade, various Primarchs reference their two lost brothers. In The Palatine Phoenix, Fulgrim refers to the second Primarch. He points out that he was quiet and contemplative. In the short story The Chamber at the End of Memory, Dawn refers to having met them both personally, something not all Primarchs did, though he can't remember much for reasons we'll get into later. And then there are other specifics. It's mentioned in a few places that both of them participated in the Rangdan Genocides, one of the biggest wars the Imperium fought in the first half of the Great Crusade. And in Fabius Bile, Clone Lord, we find out that one of the Lost Primarchs led an expedition to the ancient Necron structure known as the Ymgar Monolith during the Crusade. So both Primarchs and both legions fought at least the start of the Great Crusade. But then something happened that resulted in the 2nd and 11th Primarchs and their legions being sanctioned. We don't know what that was or what form sanction took, we can probably guess, and while both of these sanction events are often spoken about as if they're related, in the book The Lightning Tower, Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, remembers them as having two separate tragedies. And that tracks elsewhere. Robert Guillermin of the Ultramarines refers to them as the Forgotten and the Purged, and in the Visions of Heresy books, the 2nd Legion silhouette is listed as File Not Found, and the 11th as Censored. So whatever their separate transgressions, these two legions were declared null. Black scrolls were delivered to their legion homeworlds, like in the short story Lost Sons, where a black...
Really just makes me want to know more about these Lost Legions, what happened to them, who they were, etc. Because it's like, did they fall to chaos? Did their genetic modifications have some kind of malfunctions, and did they have like some kind of psychological breaks and go insane, you know, things like that? Did they, you know, rise up and revolt, whatever, and, you know, try to start a civil war against the Emperor, and like that was what his punishment was? He just wiped them out and removed them from history, kind of a thing? Or, you know, who knows?
Scrolls were delivered to their legion homeworlds, like in the short story Lost Sons, where a black scroll is delivered to Baal during the heresy when the Imperium mistakenly thinks that the Blood Angels have been wiped out. An edict of obliteration was then issued that prohibited anyone from talking about them or mentioning them, and all records of them were destroyed so that their fates didn't tarnish the morale of the Imperium. But more than that, knowledge of what exactly happened seemed so dangerous that Guillermin and Dawn had their memories permanently altered, along with presumably some of the other Primarchs, so they can't even remember what happened to them. In The Chamber at the End of Memory, Malcador, the regent of the Imperium, explains, "The loss of the 2nd and the 11th was such a wound upon us it threatened the ideals at the heart of the Great Crusade. It would have ruined all that we have built in the drive to reunite humanity and drive off our enemies. Steps had to be taken. Such was the fate of the Lost that you willingly allowed it to make safe that knowledge." So at least some of...
Yeah, did they maybe turn sides, you know, and started working for whatever alien race they were fighting at the time? And, you know, obviously it was seen as a great betrayal, or were they wiped out, you know, by something? And obviously they didn't want that, because these Stardies are supposed to be, you know, these great demigod, you know, nearly invincible kind of warriors. You know, they've been propped up as such. You know, but the Emperor calls them his bulwark, his shield, you know, etc., etc. So if something were to like really happen, and these legions were to be like wiped out by something, especially early on in these crusades, that could bring into question, are these crusades worth it, and are these Primarchs and Space Marines really, you know, up to the task? So I could see them, you know, if it's just a simple case of some battle event turned against them and they somehow got wiped out and they were just destroyed in a very bloody battle, that they might want to keep that a secret as well, and, you know, potentially wipe the memories of some of the Primarchs that were there, to not affect their morale and have, you know, dissension and whatever else spread throughout. So it could just be that simple. You know, I don't know. I'm interested to hear more about it.
The loss that you willingly allowed it to make safe that knowledge. So, at least some of the Primarchs had their memories wiped, but we know there were survivors from those legions too. Lost Sons mentions that twice before have legion armories and fleets been redistributed to other legions, and in the chamber at the end of Memory, Guilliman and Dawn argued to save the lives of the legionnaires that were left over after this. They also seem to have had their memories wiped and were inducted into the Ultramarines and the Imperial Fist legions, and this fits those two legions' backstory. The Imperial Fists had a really wide recruitment base, which meant that cultural practices between their different companies could be really varied, and the Ultramarines were just really big. This repurposing of those lost legionnaires also generated rumours amongst other Astartes. In the first Heretic, the word-bearers even chat about this. "Those are just rumours," Torgal grunted. The assault sergeant didn't seem particularly certain. Perhaps, perhaps not. The 13th definitely swelled to eclipse all the other legions around the same time the 2nd and the 11th were forgotten by Imperial archives. But officially, the legions just ceased to exist, and that's certainly what other people in the Imperium thought. In Slave of New Syria, Lork, the former Legion Master of the 12th Legion, says, "Twice before the Emperor has purged his own progeny and every living soul within the legions that followed them." And that was that.
So, I mean, that seems to indicate more of an active role, that the Emperor actually wiped them out. I mean, I guess it could be kind of more of a metaphorical take on it, where, you know, he purged them from history, the knowledge of them from history. He didn't actually, you know, physically destroy the Primarchs and some of the Legion, you know, some of the other members of their legions, and those that stayed loyal, I guess, you know, he would have redistributed them. So, I don't know. Interesting.
His own progeny and every living soul within the legions that followed them. And that was that. At first, it seems a bit ridiculous that entire vaunted Astartes legions can just be forgotten across the Imperium, but we have to remember that the Great Crusade lasted 200 years, and the majority of the Imperium is made up of normal humans with normal lifespans. Even now, it can be hard to find out
that's such a vast territory, too. I mean, what happens on one planet, people might not even know about it on other planets or other sectors or whatever.
Normal humans with normal lifespans. Even now, it can be hard to find out what happened 50 years ago if no documents remain. And it's not like every common citizen of the Imperium during the Crusade era had an encyclopedic knowledge of the Primarchs and their legions to start with. So, at some point in the early 2nd century of the Great Crusade, they were forgotten. And by the time of the Heresy, they were distant memories to most of the Imperium, and to the legions, warnings of what might happen if other Primarchs were to fail. So that's the order of established events, but what was this that happened to get 2 legions sanctioned, and who did the sanctioning? It's often hinted that the Space Wolves were the Emperor's executioners.
Yeah, I've seen this in another video where the Space Wolves, there's some potential lore where the Space Wolves may have gone out, and when they were chasing Magnus, and I guess the Word Bearers, I don't remember if it was the Word Bearers or not during the Horus Heresy, but there's, you know, some lines, I guess, where he'd mentioned that they'd had to do this before, you know? So it seems like the Space Wolves may have had a hand in wiping out one or both of these legions in the past.
Who did the sanctioning? It's often hinted that the Space Wolves were the Emperor's executioners and that they were the ones to sanction the Lost Primarchs. And they'd certainly fought other Astartes before, but we only really know of 2 incidents of this. There was an event called the Night of the Wolf from Betrayer, where the Wolves took it upon themselves to warn Angron and his World Eater Legion that they were going too far. But despite a battle breaking out, they had to stop short of actually doing anything to Angron, almost like they weren't really sanctioned to be there in the first place. And of course, the second incident is the burning of Prospero at the start of the heresy, where they were dispatched to bring Magnus the Red of the Thousand Sons back to Terra in chains, and were then tricked by Horus into killing him instead.
Right.
There are loads of hints at how the wolves were there to be loosed on any Primarch that strayed, but little actual evidence of that. And in The Wolf King, the Primarch Liman Russ even expresses surprise that a Primarch could be killed, which kind of suggests he hasn't done it. But maybe sanction doesn't always mean killed. Rarely are either of the Lost Primarchs referred to as dead. The words are usually lost or failed. And in the most recent Adeptus Custodes Codex, there are hints of something called Subject 11, imprisoned deep below the palace. One thing that is really clear is that the 2 Lost Primarchs didn't fall to chaos. The distinction between the 2 Lost Primarchs and Horus's traitor legions is made multiple times, even after the Imperium is aware of the corrupting nature of chaos. In Dark Imperium, which is a 40k novel, Guilliman states that I was one of the 20, 2 failed, half the rest turned on my father, which suggests that whatever the 2 Lost Primarchs did, it wasn't turn on the Emperor. He also leaves their places in a memorial on Ultramar out of honour, and similar empty plinths are left for them in the Imperial Palace. Overall, these mystery events are treated like an unfortunate tragedy that needed to be hushed up, rather than a deliberate public betrayal. It's also implied that whatever happened to them, it was the fault of the Primarchs rather than their legions. We know that the legionnaires were reassigned and memory wiped, and in Dark Imperium, Belisarius Call, arguing that the new Primaris Space Marines should be able to make use of 2nd and 11th Legion gene seed, states that the warriors were not at fault, the science is not at fault, their Primarchs were. So, while lots of people have speculated over the years, most of the more obvious theories have been disproven by the information in all these books. Did the Emperor discover the Primarch's pod only to find out the Primarch had died? No. Did they fall into chaos or rebel against the Emperor? No. So, what's left? Well, genetic flaw.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's looking like it's leaning much toward what I said before, where maybe some of the genetic manipulation and flaws or whatever caused, you know, them to have, maybe they mutated even further, maybe, you know, they had some kind of breaks and they went insane, you know, so who knows.
Against the Emperor.
Maybe they had some other kind of mutations and stuff like that.
Nope. So what's left? Well, genetic flaws might be an obvious solution. In Fear to Tread, Sanguinius, the Primarch of the Blood Angels, talking to Horus, seems worried that the genetic flaws in the Blood Angels might be enough to warrant their sanction. You know the reason. I won't be responsible for the erasure of the Blood Angels from Imperial history. I will not have a 3rd empty plinth beneath the roof of the Hegemon as my legion's only memorial. Also, in Horus Heresy Book 3, Extermination, the backstory of the Alpha Legion mentions that some legions had gene seed flaws that meant they failed at the initial implant stage, before they even left Terra. But we kind of have to assume those were fixed, as we already know that the Marines were reused, so unless we're talking about a flaw in the Primarch alone that didn't pass down to his legion, the genetic flaw option seems unlikely. I mean, it's not like...
True, yeah. I guess that would be the case. I mean, it would probably be it would have to be an extreme rarity if the Primarch had some kind of genetic flaw or trait that caused an issue, but his legions were stable. I mean, you know, maybe something would have happened when, you know, he was sent through the warp and to one of the other planets. Maybe some mutation happened during that point that caused the problem. But, you know, I guess that would explain, you know, there being an issue with him specifically and not the legions that he would then be reunited with later. Who knows?
Down to his legion, the genetic flaw option seems unlikely. I mean, it's not like there haven't been genetic flaws in some of the other legions. The other option is a Primarch that stayed loyal, but whose methods differed so fundamentally with the Emperor's that...
Right, and we already know about that too.
He was a danger to the Imperium anyway.
There's already been instances of that with the Word Bearers.
And the Word Bearers are censured for worshipping the Emperor.
So no, it wasn't the Word Bearers. I was thinking about something else. Anyway, Magnus wasn't the Word Bearer, guys. I was thinking about something else. Yeah, I was getting them confused. This Logar is the Word Bearer guy that, was... His methods were extreme when conquering or taking over new planets and, you know, basically making sure that everyone there didn't just follow the, like, law, but they actually, like, zealotry, religiously, you know, believed the word of the Emperor and that the Emperor is basically God and the Emperor wasn't about that.
Heretic after Lorgar and the Word Bearers are censured for
could be a similar situation with one of the other Primarchs too.
Something similar to Magnus the Red. I fear the Emperor will break the Word Bearers and break me. We'd be cast alongside the brothers we no longer speak of. And this sort of idea is backed up in a lot of the backstories for the other legions. The Night Lords were censured by the Emperor for their horrific massacres near the end of the Crusade, and there were rumors that they would be sanctioned too. Vulcan, the Primarch of the Salamanders, says as much in Vulcan Lives. None of us wants another sanction, another empty pillar in the great investiary, another brother's name excised from all record. And before their reunification with Sanguinius, the Blood Angels had such a bloody reputation.
It looks like a Cylon.
Rumors they might suffer.
It's like a beefed up Cylon, you know, with the little eye thing going.
The same fate. So the idea of loyal legions being a bit too enthusiastic in a way that warrants their destruction has a lot of evidence. And there are loads of other weird little quotes hidden here and there, many of them contradictory, but there is one place a lot of these threads seem to converge, somewhere a lot of the evidence points, and that is back in the Rangdan Xenocides. So the Rangdan Xenocides were one of the largest campaigns ever fought by the Imperium during the Great Crusade, and the most tightly won. The Xenos Rangda were so ridiculously powerful that it was possible the entire Imperial project might have been snuffed out before it really got started. And the Imperium suffered huge losses fighting them, so much so that legions like the Dark Angels, once the largest legion who led the charge during the Rangdan Wars, never really recovered, and other legions started to eclipse them in the 2nd century of the Crusade. The Imperium won in the end and exterminated the Rangda, but the idea that the Imperium could have been defeated was damaging enough that the wars were wiped from Imperial records.
Right, exactly, because that again, like I'd said earlier, the idea that these Primarchs and these Astartes can do no wrong and that they're these great, you know, soldiers that can't be defeated, can't die, they're humanity perfected, you know, that was kind of the idea that the Emperor seemed to be pushing and really needed them to be that, to keep humanity unified. And if it was known that these, you know, legions had been wiped out in some kind of great battle, that would be a huge morale hit to other Astartes, and if that knowledge would be spreading to normal humans, that would question a lot of things and put question in the Emperor as, you know, is he really the one to lead us, etc., etc., and that could cause dissension and uprisings and civil wars potentially if it got far enough. So it would definitely be a reason why they would want to, you know, sanction that and keep that knowledge out of the history books.
Could have been defeated was damaging enough that the wars were wiped from Imperial records, and by the time of the heresy, not much is known about exactly what the Rangda were or why they were such a threat. However, we know that the 2nd and 11th Legions fought in those wars. An article on Regimental Standard, Games Workshop's sort of comedy propaganda site, sneaks in a mention of them in a misprint in the Imperial Infantryman's Uplifting Primer. And the Horus Heresy's History of the Space Wolves gives us a little more detail. Whole expeditionary fleets went to their deaths without a single survivor. Worlds were laid waste. Dozens of Titan legions were obliterated, and by the end, entire Space Marine legions and a redacted bit lost to the Imperium. So that's one option, probably the simplest one and the most likely.
Right.
But one of the Lost Primarchs was simply killed in battle.
Right.
But the book goes on to describe...
And I mean, even the Primarchs themselves think that that's almost like Lehman Russ even stated that he didn't know it was even possible for a Primarch to be killed. They might not even think that the idea of death is a thing. So, yeah.
The Lost Primarchs was simply killed in battle. But the book goes on to describe how, at the end of the war, whole human populations had to be purged of the taint of the Rangdan Cerebvors, in case any trace of them was left, and how the Space Wolves were assigned to do this. That's actually how they became known as the Emperor's Executioners. Rangdan Cerebvors, of course, implies brain eaters, and during the Great Crusade, we know there were plenty of Xenos species who, through mind control or genetic manipulation, ruled over human populations. What if the Rangdan Cerebvors were so powerful that they managed to infect a Primarch?
True.
Or defeat a Primarch and infect his legion? That would tie up a lot of the loose ends. A Primarch could fall by being infected by a Xenos parasite or mind-controlled without deliberately turning traitor. They'd be corrupted without the need for chaos, and they could still start out pure and loyal, as is mentioned the 11th did in the First Heretic. That also doesn't require any genetic flaw, but maybe after being infected, the Legion would be
seems like a logical
and still require
explanation
purging by someone like the Space Wolves.
If an alien race had that kind of technology, you know, where they could take control of other species through various mind control means, either by parasites or psychic, means, etc., and take control of them that way and turn them against other legions or whatever, it would make sense. That would be a logical conclusion as to why they would turn and why they would be eliminated.
Legion would be unrecoverable and still require purging by someone like the Space Wolves or its Primarch locked away by the Custodes in the vaults of the palace. And the 2nd and 11th Legion Astartes who weren't present for the Rangdan Wars, who were stationed to other areas of the galaxy, wouldn't be at fault and would still be safe to fold into the Ultramarines, or
and they wouldn't know what happened,
reviving their gene seed in 40k. And finally, maybe the Rangda was such a horrific example of mind control, such a strange alien species, that even the memory of them could be something that poses a threat. The whole fun of this is that we'll never really know. But if Games Workshop have a plan at all, I think that's where everything's pointing. A conflict against the most powerful alien species in the galaxy, which resulted in Primarchs and their legions being lost, or worse, mind-controlled by the Xenos power. A story so demoralizing to the Imperium that all knowledge of it was concealed in the most permanent way possible, lest the taint of the Rangda return. Or it could have been something completely different, we just don't know.
Right.
The Lost Legions might have originally been a...
That's the thing that is kind of cool, but at the same time not. Sometimes it's nice to have definitive answers, and sometimes it's nice for things to be a little ambiguous. It's one of the things that makes the Dark Souls games great, is they give you just enough of like factual lore, and then they leave the rest of it up to interpretation. So I like things like that. So it could be any number of things that could have caused these two legions to be redacted.
Or it could have been something completely different, we just don't know. The Lost Legions might have originally been a way of allowing you to build a unique army, but I like the way Black Library dealt with a timeline that inevitably would have to involve them, by making their loss even more mysterious than before. And if Black Library are clever with this, we'll never find out the truth. Thanks for watching.
Okay.
So next video we will return.
Well, there we go. Arbitor Ian's video. That's Lost Legion, the Primarchs of the Horus Heresy, Legions 2 and 11. So I mean, yeah, it's like I said, I like the idea. It would be nice to have an actual answer, but at the same time, it's also nice that it's left up to interpretation, so there can be speculation with just enough hints to get people to wonder about what it actually was. I kind of lean towards the idea of, from his explanation here, it makes logical sense that maybe there was something that happened with that alien race that was so demoralizing that it would have brought the Emperor's leadership and where he was trying to take humanity in question, and it would have been so demoralizing to other Primarchs and the Astartes that he had to wipe it from the history books. Because if like he said, Leman Russ, you know, the Space Wolf Primarch, didn't even like enter his mind that a Primarch could die. So if they have that kind of mentality where they're just immortal, they can't be killed, you know, I don't know if they just know they're perpetuals or if it's just they just don't think they can be killed because of their enhancements, how strong they are, how well they heal, how strong their immune systems are to various things. They just can't be killed, you know, because it hadn't happened in history, you know, at that point. So then them finding out that, yeah, that actually can be the case, that a Primarch and a good chunk of his legions were wiped out during this war, and then another legion lost significant numbers, you know, the Raven Guild or Raven Clan or whatever. I'm getting their names messed up. I haven't been into the 40k stuff enough to remember all of their the names. I just say the Raven Guild or Raven Clan, but they apparently took significant losses during, you know, the battle against these alien races. So I mean, that seems to be what the logical conclusion would be. I wonder, again, like I said, if they have any plans to do, like, if it's true that this Primarch was actually imprisoned and the Custodes are watching over him. That could be an interesting story if somehow he got loose, broke out, and to know what actually happened to him. Maybe it was, you know, if that's something they want to go, you know, it could, you know, spread across. Maybe if it is an, you know, an alien race that, you know, mind controlled them, maybe that's how, maybe it's like, you know, mind flayers in D&D, where that's how they actually you know, propagate their species. They don't actually mate, they infect other species with parasites that convert them to their race, kind of a situation. So maybe that's what happened, you know, and that's, it wasn't actually like a mind control thing. It was they actually changed. The parasite actually changed them, and they weren't recoverable, something like that. So it's interesting to theorize about these things, but it would be, I'm curious if Games Workshop has any kind of plans to do anything with those legions in the future, if they plan on, you know, revealing more information about them or bringing them back in some way, because maybe they were just lost to the warp, or, you know, who knows, anything's possible. But yeah, so that was Arbiter Ian's video on the Lost Legions of Primarchs of the Horus Heresy. So like I said before, I will have the link to this video and his channel down below in the description. Go check him out, give him a sub, and you know, check out all his content. He's got a lot of great stuff on his channel, and I appreciate you guys watching this video. If you're still here at the end, it means a lot. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me grow. As the making of this video, next Saturday, the 9th of December, if you guys are around and you want to, we're gonna do a community game night with some Darktide. So if you want to come in, hang out, play some Darktide with me, and meet some other people in the community, and hang out and have some fun, you know, come on in. We're gonna be playing probably around 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and going for, you know, 4 or 6 hours, and we're just gonna have a good time and chill out and kill some heretics. So come join us. But for now, I appreciate it. I hope you're having a wonderful day whenever you're watching this and wherever you're at, and I will see you guys on the next one. Have a good one, everybody.